Welcome to another Appendix podcast where we delve into the latest developments in application virtualization. I'm your host, Ingmar Verheij, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with Tim Mangan, a renowned expert in the field. Tim is the founder of TMurgent Technologies, specializing in application virtualization and performance. He's a Microsoft MVP and recognized as a CTP fellow. Tim has been instrumental in shaping the landscape of application deployment and virtualization. Hey Tim, it's great having you in the podcast today.
Hey, morning, Ingmar.
Yeah, good morning. And good afternoon from my side, actually.
Yeah, that's true.
Globalization, hooray. So, today's episode, I really want us to talk about, the recent announcements from Microsoft regarding the continuation of Microsoft Application Virtualization, or AppV as we try to call it. Previously slated for end of life April 2026. Microsoft has now reversed this decision, extending the support for the AppV client and sequencer. However, they did mention, AppV server components are still deprecated, with support ending in April 2026. Now that the dust has settled, this decision was announced in November last year. What are your thoughts on this decision?
Well, I think it's great. It's great for the customers. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Large number of customers out there that are still using AppV and dependent upon it. And they were, looking at that end date and getting worried about it. And it was, quite frankly, it was a surprise to me, probably to you as well, that Microsoft suddenly changed course after so long of saying, no, this is really it. There's no appetite to extend the dates for AppV. And now they've done it. And it's sort of amazing that happened. And I think that's good for the customers. It'll give them more time to figure out what they really want to do. I mean, ultimately, I think they probably need to continue with some plans, but it's great for everybody involved.
Yep. No, I agreed. I mean, it was kind of a shock when it was announced, or when we were briefed that it was getting announced. You can see the shock in the community as well, where some blog posts on like, "Hey, hooray, it's back," and shock of like, "Hey, we didn't see this coming." And there's also a slight bit of doubt on the decision, right? So is this now final, or are they going to change the decision? Like, are they going to come back to this one in 3 months?
Yeah, I mean, I looked at the blog that Sebastian Gennard updated just, I don't know, maybe a week or two ago.
Oh, really?
And the statement that was in there was just, I had to laugh when I read the statement, because I can't believe that Microsoft said it. But what they said was that they would not take the AppV client out of future versions of any future versions of Windows. I just, there isn't any software that's in the operating system that they would never, ever, ever remove. They'd be willing to say that it will always be in the operating system.
And that statement said it,
and that just doesn't pass my smell test.
No, I think there's, we need to take them one with a grain of salt. I mean,
yeah,
it's really great to hear that they say, like, in the current OS, we're not removing it. So if they say, like, Windows 11 and Server 2025, we'll keep it in there. Even that, I think, is quite the promise.
I think that's good. We need to start thinking about things like, well, will there be a Windows 12, and when would that be, and what it would need. You have to concern yourself that it may not be there forever.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, we built the original platform this is 2025 now, so this will be the 25th anniversary in November when we started that project.
Yeah, wow. That's SoftGrid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was that the first product, or did you have a product prior to that?
We had a product prior to that, although we actually had a different company name at that point. We were called Software Wow. So the transition over to Softricity was for this product. Uh-huh. But what we were doing was the equivalent to game streaming. Now, we weren't doing any of the virtualization stuff, but we were taking off-the-shelf software and streaming it from the web down to people's machines. And this was, at the end of the 1990s, 2000, and people were connected to the internet through modems at those days, analog modems,
exactly.
Low-speed stuff. But streaming was really our forte as we started that, and then we realized this better opportunity for some of the tricks we had to do to get the software to actually work in this environment without being installed. and those had great value for the enterprise.
Yeah, yeah, it makes a lot of sense having that streaming component, and also, I mean, obviously, Softricity evolved into AppV, and virtualization was part of this, and there's so much more added to AppV as a whole, coming from the original software product. How do you see AppV used today? Like, what's the biggest reasons for customers using it? Because what you just mentioned, like on streaming the application over the network, when we're having conversations about clients about AppV and what about the future, should we keep using AppV or should we go to MSIX? It's not always about the containerization, right, or the virtualization aspect of AppV, which is definitely a key feature, but what do you see? Like, what's the reason that they're using AppV?
Well, there is a use case for the streaming piece that's really important, and you need to have that. And that's that sort of non-persistent VDI or the RDS server where users are coming in, and you need to get that software there on demand very rapidly. But that's really a bit of a niche case. What the value for AppV for most of these enterprises is that it has such a good remediation engine built directly inside it that you can capture these applications and it's going to work, and it's not going to interfere with any other application on the box when you bring it in. That you have the ability to prepare that application once and it'll run on all of your scenarios, not just those VDI ones, but you can take it, put it out through Config Manager or Intune and push that out to end users, or Appventix. And you can get it out to wherever you need those things, and that's been the big value for AppV.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So having an application inside a package, or even like a containerized application, it basically makes it portable, right? So you can build it once and you can just distribute in your organization. Pretty much convinced it's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, as I talk to customers, I talk about their trust model, and just for a large organization, how many different vendors can you trust? I mean, you have to trust, the Microsofts of the world and those folks to do the right thing in the software that they're giving to you. But when you start talking about hundreds or thousands of independent software vendors that are out there, and every release that they make, you can't necessarily trust all of them to do the right thing all the time and not take down your environment or a whole bunch of users from your environment all at once. And so you want to be able to have control over things like when those things get updated and make sure that they're not going to cause a problem as they get rolled out.
So do you think that AppV is a good solution? Basically, containerizing an application helps you isolate that aspect.
Yeah, I think absolutely.
Yeah, no, and agree that. And I also think, I mean, moving forward, AppV definitely is, it's proven technology, streaming and the containerizing. Then came along MSIX, and I think it was a blog post by Jim Skinden, as a reply to AppV being extended. He called this a win for common sense, as he heard that his customers were frustrated with the options and the costs associated with them. That it apparently was even more appealing going back to local installs, even though the applications were happily packaged with AppV. What do you see as the alternatives to AppV? Is MSIX the answer, or like what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think MSIX is ready to be kind of the primary choice for people that do want to move. It contains a lot of the things that AppV did, although we do it a little bit differently. It's not as mature, so it doesn't have that 20-year history behind it. But it's coming along pretty darn well at this point. Mm-hmm. It involves both aspects of what AppV does, which is what's important. Because there are some other choices that are out there that are good choices as well. But both of those technologies include the containerization piece to ensure that you don't break things as you add and remove software,
Yeah.
And that's really important. But they also contain the data associated with the user running the application, so that you have less problem with cross-application issues, not from the applications getting put down, but from the data that happens. So what happens if that software does get hit by a virus, or something tries to come in as you try to use that application out on some internet piece? You're running a Java application. Well, you're more likely to be able to contain the damage from that type of problem if you're running inside a container as opposed to running natively. I do see a lot of customers going back for a number of their apps, so going back to native, and that's an option that makes some sense in some areas. But I think the more that you can keep these things containerized and safe, your organization is going to end up being more stable in the long run.
Yep, and I mean, when MSIX was introduced, I think 2018, is that correct? Somewhere in that area. I mean, it was also pitched towards ISVs, right? Like, hey, this is the new way of packaging and distributing your applications. I mean, ideally, ISVs would package their application using MSIX, and then by default, that security is there, right? So
yeah,
we haven't seen a lot of uptake, but I must say that the last couple of months I actually saw a couple of applications outside of Microsoft. So Microsoft obviously is now coming out with their, some of their core products as MSIX, so Teams, but also PowerShell. Well, Notepad is not really.
Well, what I see happening behind the scenes is, the vendors are starting to develop their applications with the newer frameworks that Microsoft makes out, right? So we have the old Win32 stuff that goes back 20 plus years. We had the .NET framework pieces, .NET 3s and 4 series, and then they came out with what we were originally calling .NET Core. Now they just called .NET. And right now, developers creating anything new are building in .NET 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. And we're seeing some of that software come out in the market. And that software is built to go directly into the container. That's what's Microsoft's intent. Now, along the way, Microsoft did something funny, is that they gave the developers a chance to do what they call unpackaged .NET, which means they take that same software and they don't run it in the container, and they push it out as a native install. And those apps are actually some of the more challenging out there to deploy these days, because figuring out what frameworks you need and the different mechanisms that the developers use to tie into that framework interfere with different types of packaging up into containers. And we have to adjust the way that software works to be able to do a better job of handling those going forward.
Any idea how we can recognize this kind of applications? Because this is the first time that I heard this. I mean, I always thought like, hey, there's a requirement or dependency on .NET Framework version X, and then, you're good to go. But are they doing this to alleviate that dependency? Like, hey, you know what? We baked it in. All the DLLs are in there, so you're golden. Or
largely, the idea of the packaged version of these applications is, you go back to that state where you are putting everything you need directly in there. But when it comes to that .NET framework underlying piece, that's something that you don't put inside the container. That's got to go down on a native system. Enterprises are going to deal with it really the same way that a lot of them dealt with the VC runtimes, where you have a standard process of patching, making sure that on your engine you've got the latest version of all of those pieces. So the .NET 2015 to 2022, I think, is the name of it. The old VC runtime 140 series, right? Microsoft maintains that. They update that thing once a month with security fixes. They're doing the same thing with these .NET runtimes that you need. And that's got to go down. In terms of identifying what applications need that, it's funny you should ask, because I have a release of some of my tooling that's coming out. Well, it should have been last week.
Soon.
Maybe by this weekend I'll get it finished. That actually includes some detection of that stuff. So that's one of the things I like to do, is to call out those types of things and say, okay, hey, you've got these VC runtimes in here. We can take them out of the package or not if you want to. And then, it's going to need, this .NET 8, 9, and 7 for this particular application. So at least you have that awareness as part of the application preparation process.
Yeah. That's good. That's clever thinking. And I mean, I like the work that you do, obviously, but also by identifying those kind of, weird decisions. I think these are weird decisions by developers, making their product work. But I also think it's also kind of a success for Microsoft that these kind of applications are probably easier to get into MSIX, especially when MSIX is now part of Visual Studio, right? You can just build that application as an MSIX, and maybe I'm wrong historically, but I don't think that option has ever been there for FV.
No, it's never been there for FV.
See, so that's kind of a win, even though we don't see the adoption just yet. I am getting the impression that we are, starting the cycle of vendors where, they start releasing their application as an MSIX as an option, right? As a maybe not the default installation, but I do see it happening.
I think when you look at some of those large applications that have been out there for a really long time, Microsoft, did make a big push to try to get those guys. Oh, you should go to MSIX. You should go to the and they took a look. And they had a lot of problems, and it wasn't surprising. The MSI technology was a little raw when it first came out, and Microsoft has done a lot to extend it. So we're seeing our ability to repackage that type of software and get it to run now at a much higher rate. But the thing that Microsoft has been doing in the background that I don't think a lot of enterprises see is they've actually been doing tooling for the vendors to help them convert their software over. And they have some very nice things. So I've got this software, it's like a side project I have called Solman Software. And it's something I actually started writing in 1982. I had my first DOS PC. It's a solitaire game. Actually, at this point, it's a collection of 115 solitaire games. And I've used it over the years as a way to understand, as a developer, the new technologies going forward. So, originally it was a DOS PC. I didn't even have a graphics card, so it was ASCII text characters on the screen. And so every 5 years I go and I rewrite that software to the newest platforms that Microsoft has. And so I had an old DOS program, then I had a Windows Win32 program, and then I went into .NET Framework. I made a UWP version for it a number of years back, and then this last summer. I ran through the Microsoft converter to then convert that into .NET 8, and it was actually a piece of cake. Every time I've done that in the past, it would take me a month to 2 months to redo everything into the new framework. And I was able in 1 week to be able to take that thing from UWP directly into an MSIX application that's running using .NET 8. So it's easier for vendors to be able to do that now. It's going to take some time for them to really get into their development cycles to kick that off, because it's going to be a big effort on them, and a lot of these vendors will take something like that on maybe only once a year. And it might not be the right year for them to decide to do that right now, but we'll see some of that stuff, even the older stuff, start to come along.
Yeah, and coming back to what you previously said on basically both FV and MSIX, but because it's a container, you are basically inherently increasing security, or at least lowering the threat that's involved in your application. So
and the pitch that Microsoft needs to make to those developers, I think, is it's better for the developer. That your software will be running in a way that nothing else on that system is going to interfere with it. Your support calls should go down when you start putting this stuff and running it inside a container directly.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you phrased it correctly. It should go down. And I think on the application side of things, it probably will, right? Because, you're more in control of that specific container and what goes in and out. So therefore, you get a more guaranteed environment where the application runs in. However, I think, Microsoft was one of the first to come out with a massive update on, using MSIX with their Teams application. So Teams, I don't know, version 2 or so, it came out by default as an MSIX, and I don't think their support calls went down, doing that.
Yeah, and we're seeing it on a bunch of, Microsoft has done so much of the smaller software that they have, things like Notepad and things like that they've switched over. I think, the one everyone's waiting for is, well, where's the rest of Office? Right? But the new Outlook is containerized. I don't particularly love the new Outlook yet, but it's coming along quite nicely.
So with the new Outlook, I feel like you should just do it. I clicked that button like 3 years ago, 2-3 years ago. I think during Ignite when they announced this. Yes, I was missing features, but now I don't miss the features anymore because I've been feeling the pain for so long. It's okay, and actually that's been a nice journey. It's getting better. The things that I was missing, typically I don't miss. I do wonder, like, what about the rest of the suite, right? Because Word, Excel, PowerPoint, these are the heavy hitters, just like Outlook. But there's so much more.
I think the big challenge for Microsoft there is all of the plugins. Because the old style plugins is not going to work in that containerized environment. So you've got to get all of those people to redevelop that stuff. And it's some of that stuff's never going to get redeveloped no matter what you do.
No, I mean, whatever client
maybe some of it shouldn't, but
there's this one Excel plugin or this one Word template plugin, that's built in Office 97. Last year I had one was requiring Office 97. So yeah, but gotta bite the bullet at some point.
Microsoft Access is never going to go away, really.
No, different topic, but I would say Microsoft Power Apps is Microsoft Access in the clouds. Same.
Okay.
Everyone can build an app, so let's build them in the cloud. Yeah. Anyhow, that's a different topic. I do wonder, knowing this about MSIX and success rate is definitely higher. You have a yearly report in which you do an assessment. What were the numbers right now? It's January.
So a year ago, the number was 82%. At the end of this month is when I put out the report for this year. And I've done much of that work now. I'm in the editing process, but we're going to be at 90% this year.
That's good.
Which, it's good progress. Not where we want to be, but it's great progress that we're continuing to move that upward trend. And my concern for the AppV customers that I want to make sure I put out there is that my number for AppV has traditionally been 98%. But when I talked about some of those new .NET 7, 8, 9 programs, there are programs out there like Handbrake that's written in that. And AppV's having problems with some of those. My number for AppV is now dropping from 98 to 95%. And if Microsoft isn't investing in making changes to the client, of which they've made some noises, but let's be honest, they haven't had anybody touch that for at least 5 or 6 years.
No.
I question how much we're going to see. So if they don't address that, we're going to start seeing that AppV number continue to slowly drop down a little bit as the applications modernize against this containerized platform that didn't understand that was even going to happen. So that number will probably start dropping, and we're going to hit a tipping point at some point in the future where we're going to see a higher compatibility by moving to MSIX than staying with AppV. And that's something that enterprises need to keep in the back of their mind, even if they're not trying to do a changeover today.
Yeah. No, and I think you're hitting a good point there that, the applications, but also the operating system, the underlying operating system, these are evolving, right? So the customers that are using AppV today, unless they're sticking on to, older technology as a whole, right? So their operating system, everything, if everything remains the same, then the output is going to remain the same. However, most organizations are either moving to Windows 11, they're moving to Server 25. So there is evolution happening in the underlaying platform. And that's going to impact those applications running on AppV. Because, the article written and the announcement by Microsoft is, we're keeping the lights on, right? You're getting support. And probably, when there's a security vulnerability, it will get patched. I'm sure they will. But we've read nothing on innovation or, actually updating the engine and, supporting more modern frameworks.
Yeah, and in the long run, where MSIX really is, from Microsoft's perspective, the native format for Windows going forward, you're going to end up needing to be there someday.
Exactly. Yeah.
But for this year, hey, spend your energy worrying about making sure you get the last of those devices over onto Windows 11. Spend the time thinking about Server 25 and those things, and just stay with what you're doing with AppV. But for new applications going forward, start looking to the future.
Yeah. So is that your recommendation for, let's say those customers who are kind of worried, and what I get from the meetings is they're quite relieved on this announcement, like, that April 2026 was getting closer, as it happens with dates. But they are relieved that the date has gone. What would you recommend them doing? Because the publishing servers and reporting servers are still gone, so they need a solution for that. Should they go to MSIX, stay for FV? What's the direction you see?
Yeah, so I mean, Microsoft was very clear that they're going to maintain the FV client in the sequence, but not the server. And I think for most organizations, wow, it's really good to be at Ventix right now, because I think you guys are the solution to distribute those applications for the enterprises. So it becomes very easy to, okay, let's switch over, let's get rid of that server because it's going away. Let's go to this more modern way of distributing applications. And oh, by the way, it can also distribute the MSIX stuff for us at the same time. So as we get new application requests in, let's start doing some of those in the new format and get our feet wet. Now, some customers may already be in a transition. They were already planning for that end of life and have already started to transition over. They should continue that effort. Maybe the priority on that effort isn't as high as it was before November, but you should continue that, yes.
Yeah, and agreed. And that's exactly what we hear. Just this morning I had a meeting with a client who was, we were engaging with because, April 26th is coming and, hey, we need to get rid of FV, we need to move into MSIX. Well, I mean, we were born over 10 years ago out of distributing FV applications without infrastructure, so that's what we do. We've built this very robust. We've included MSIX in 2019, I think, so quite early on. So that's fairly easy. But even those
I don't know about
clients,
you, but I've been inundated since the first of the year. With customers calling.
Yes,
it's crazy how all of a sudden they're like, oh, hey, we have to do something.
Yeah. But also, I mean, but now with this latest change, you do see them like changing their course slightly. Like, okay, yes, we are investigating MSIX, but Windows 11 and Server 25, so they are reprioritizing what they're doing. Like, okay, let's first make sure we are on Windows 11 or Server 2025, like you said. So there are some tech debt basically that they need to solve prior to moving to MSIX, and then MSIX is put on at the afterburner. Like, hey, like you said, whenever we get a new application in, probably best to consider deploying this as an MSIX instead of FV. But what I do see is like a knowledge gap, right? So you see, there's a knowledge gap in the people who are used to doing FV, but also there's I'm not sure if it's a knowledge gap, but a technology gap, as you basically already mentioned. Like, you need more tooling, you need more you have tooling, right? You have TMEdit, you have TMEdit X.
Right.
I'd never heard of TMEdit, but TMEdit X, every client, right? Whoever's doing MSIX, I happily endorse TMEdit X because it's kind of needed in getting that 90% success rate, because without that, you're hitting 50-60%. So what are your thoughts on the need of PSF and like, where do you position TMEdit X?
I think TMEdit X is exactly the way you put it. I love the way you put that. It is basically a requirement. You can't get enough compatibility out of what Microsoft does directly.
Yeah.
And so, we've been pushing the edge with that and making that a tool that works. The TMEdit product, tries to do the same type of thing for AppV, but the needs aren't as high because the sequencer has so much history. It does a pretty good job. There are a couple of bugs in the sequencer that force us to build the TMEdit, because the sequencer does have a couple of problems. Like, there's a long path problem on a bunch of packages. And so we use a tool like that to post-process and fix that up, and then just try to improve the package the best we can. And so TMEdit X builds on that, but helps it work for MSIX. I think from the technology point that you were making there, though, the tools that you use and the techniques you use are a little bit different between the two technologies. But being someone that's out there, teaching IT desktop pros how to package up applications, the underlying needs are really the same, and the techniques that you use and the tools you use are going to be a little bit different. But the underlying challenges are always the same. And understanding why you have to do things is very critical and goes across the different platforms and the different tools that you want to use to make these things work.
Yep. Yeah. So I'm just, sometimes I hear organizations that are looking into MSIX say like, I'm a Microsoft expert. There's a Microsoft tool. It's just next finish. everyone can do this. But I mean, I know you as not only building great tools, but you also are a trainer for both AppV and MSIX packaging. What would you recommend them? I mean, I can say I can recommend you as a trainer, but what would you recommend them, and what are your availabilities?
I think that particularly for MSIX, the training is critical. If you talk about the numbers that I talk about are from someone who is well trained in the technology, right? I think AppV, the difference between an untrained and a trained person with AppV is not that great. When I say 98%, that's the trained number. The untrained person that just picks up and tries to figure it out on their own, and looking at some of my old YouTube videos or whatever, they can certainly do 80-85% just with that, without any training. I think with MSIX, you need that training to be able to do that. Although, over time, it's going to get better, right? I mean, we had 20-some years with AppV. A lot of the work that I did this year is to try to automate as much as possible to give you the big button. You just go click, fix my package. I don't want to think about it. And at this point, I think we can get to the 75% with MSIX, which is pretty darn good considering 2 years ago we were only getting a little less than 75% with the full trained expert mode. So it's coming along, and it's going to get better over time.
Yeah, agreed. And I hope so. I hope MSIX is getting better. I mean, obviously there are alternatives to AppV and MSIX, so there are third-party toolings out there. We at Appendix, we believe Microsoft has the right toolings in hand. There's also, I mean, they are, they provide Visual Studio. They have the right all the right means on controlling everything in play. I mean, they own the OS, so it's good focusing on Microsoft. You mentioned the center of trust, or how many vendors can you trust and how many vendors can you manage. So we definitely believe that MSIX is a good answer to AppV. More than happy that AppV is extended. The end of life is gone basically. So customers can focus on Windows 11 and other priorities. But we definitely need more education. We need more, I would say, more noise around what's needed for MSIX and helping those customers, get a containerized version of their application. It kind of feels like a couple of steps back going to a native installed application just because you don't understand MSIX. Yeah. All right, so Tim, I think it's time for us to wrap up. Unless you had something else that you wanted to cover today.
No, really. It was nice talking with you again, as always.
Absolutely. And so a huge thank you to you, Tim, for sharing your insights and expertise. On the continuation of AppV, the impact on the virtualization landscape. Thank you for learning on your deep knowledge on the field. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to know more about Appendix, visit appendix.com or connect us on our socials. Tim, where can people find out more about you?
It would be TMurgent.com.
Sounds good.
Website.
All right. Thank you. Until then, take care.